In today's video, I attempted to survive 100 days in hardcore Minecraft in a world where everything is random. That's right, in this world, every item you break drops a different random item in its place. Every mob that you kill will drop random items instead of the regular drops, and any chests that I find will have their contents replaced with random items instead. And for these 100 days, I don't just want to survive, I want to conquer. So I've given myself 4 crazy goals that I would like to accomplish before the last day. Goal number 1, I would like to get full OP armor, and I want to go to the end to kill the Ender Dragon a lot. That's right, I want to kill the Ender Dragon at least 5 times before my time in this world is up. Goal number 2, I want to get rich and make as many sextuple beacons as I can. Goal number 3, I don't want to just become rich, I want to become ridiculously rich and make an army of diamond and netherite armored soldier using armor stands. And goal number 4, I want to build myself a castle for all of my soldiers to protect, and it needs to be flashy and expensive. And now that we've got the goals out of the way, I will leave a link in the description down below for you to go and check out this awesome website that I used to randomize my seeds so you can all play a world just like this, but with different loot drops. Also, while you're in the description, don't forget to check out my brand new merch website, PainDomination.shop, where you can find crazy cool shirts and hoodies that look like this, or this. Every purchase helps support the channel and me, and you get to rep some super cool designs. Also, if you do go on to enjoy the video, you should totally click that little red button down below to join the Domination Nation, because I post lots of quality content like this weekly, and it's also a free way to support me. And one last thing, don't forget to drop a like and leave a comment down below so the algorithm knows just how much you like the video and it'll share it with more people. If this video gets to 30,000 likes, I will do another challenge 100 days video similar to this one. Anyways, we've got a ton to accomplish in this video, so let's get right into it. On the first day, I spawned in a spruce biome, which normally would be amazing because spruce was one of my favorite building materials. However, since items are randomized, I wasn't so lucky. So I began doing what any Minecrafter would do on the first day, and I started punching a nearby tree, except the leaves dropped wool and the spruce wood drops red banners, which was kind of whack. After that, I began hitting the spruce biome grass and it dropped end stone, and I found my first mob. It was a pig that was probably in the prime of his young life, or at least he was, until I spawned into this world and I punched him off of a hill. And this man dropped wither skeleton drops, which kind of blows my mind, because like, did I just get lucky and get the wither skull, or do they all drop wither skulls? I guess the next pig I find will tell me the answer to that question. So I went on looking for some more pigs, and you know me, it doesn't take long for me to get distracted. I punched some berry bushes, and they dropped the loot table of those crappy underwater chests with drowned, but hey, I did get some free food from it. After that, I saw a squid and some salmon in a nearby river, so I Control-Alt-deleted the squid, and the stingy clarinet player dropped me nothing. What a guy. Anyways though, those salmon were about to be my next victim. I mean friends. And these boys dropped me beacons. The salmon dropped me beacons. So as you can see, I absolutely flipped the hell out, and I no longer even need the wither skulls because I've now got beacons from salmon. So I continued my vicious hunt down the river, slaying more salmon, and I was already a guy that had 8 beacons on the first day. However, the daylight was fading and I still had nothing to survive with, so I left the water and I quickly found some more pigs who apparently 100% of the time dropped wither skulls, which is amazing. And not long after that, I found the ultimate piece of wisdom that only Wisdom Dog could dispense. I punched some sand and they dropped emerald blocks, which means I am literally set for life. It is the first day, and I have all the supplies I need to make an absolutely perfect sextuple beacon anywhere I want. Or I could go to a nearby village and become an absolute millionaire because I control all the supply of emeralds. So yeah, I'm pretty sure you could tell this was going to be a good run. Anyways, now all I needed was a source of wood, and I can make both a bed and some food using the wheat, and I swear the seed loves me because I found a forest fire by a lava pool with tons of netherwood. Apparently fire drops stripped crimson wood. Weird. So I made a crafting table and made myself a lime green bed and some bread to hold me over, and I went to sleep before I had to deal with all of the crazy that nighttime was going to bring, because this was a hardcore world after all. On day 2, I woke up and crafted myself a wood pickaxe and a wooden shovel, and I set off on my journey to find the village that I was going to become king of. Except I made a few stops along the way. I broke some more berries for food, I tested breaking stone and got sandstone stairs, and I killed a sheep who dropped me a brick, which I don't know why, but that was kind of funny. Brick Sheep will have his vengeance. So after abruptly ending Brick Sheep's heroic career, I may have gotten distracted again by just breaking things from my inventory to find out more things and slowly descending down Alice's rabbit hole. And then I found it. Fences which drop from seaweed drop diamonds. And also my gray wool dropped mushrooms that dropped 8 obsidian each, which doesn't even make sense, but you know what? I'll take it. After this, I also found how to get gold blocks. However, this one was way more convoluted, and it was at that point that I realized I was going to need to start writing down what dropped what on another text file, or I was quickly going to forget everything and ascend into chaos. On day 3, I stumbled back upon the ocean, so I went to punch some more seaweed so I can get more diamonds, except apparently I was already confused because they dropped mossy cracked bricks, which dropped cornflowers, and they dropped the blacksmith chest loot pool, I think. So I broke some more, and it was indeed a blacksmith chest. I got an iron helmet and chest plate, some iron swords and picks, and some more diamonds. So you know what I did? I got a ton of cracked bricks, broke them for more cornflowers, and then absolutely spammed them for loot. And I got myself a full set of iron armor, a ton of apples and breads, and a lot of obsidian and iron, but I only ended up with 7 Diamondes, which was the big sad. After this, I made myself a shield and I went to make a boat. However, you can't make boats with netherwoods, so yeah, I guess I was swimming myself. And while I was in the ocean, I checked a bunch of corals and they didn't really drop that much. And by the time I got to land, it was nighttime again, so I went back to bed. On day 4, I started the day out with some good old-fashioned chicken smacking, and then I realized chickens were the tickets to diamonds. They dropped glazed terracotta that through a ridiculous sequence of items dropped diamonds. And at that point, I had realized that Minecraft was becoming one of those riddle games. Anyways, while exploring, I found some birch buttons which drop pumpkins, and these boys dropped ender dragon heads, which will look great in my brand new castle. Also, while exploring this new biome, I had struck gold. I found my first village in the distance, and I was excited to crash their economy. So I ran over to the village, and the very first thing I started doing was destroying everything that was new, and then it clicked. Villages have fences, which means free diamonds. So yeah, I busted up their pig pen for some easy profit. What are they gonna do? Sue me? They're just villagers. Anyways, I continued exploring around the village, and while visiting the mason, I realized how I got the wood fences in the first place, and it was clay blocks. After harassing the mason and while back out exploring, I also noticed that torches dropped an assortment of meats, which is a much more disturbing sentence when said out loud. Anyways, after all of this looting, it was starting to become nighttime again, so I went to sleep to dodge more of the Twitter stands. On day 5, I woke up to a bunch of mobs outside, so I tested out to see what they dropped. And zombies ended up dropping gold ores, horses dropped repeaters, I'm sorry horses, creepers dropped nothing, jerks, and cows dropped cow stuff. Weird way to start the day. Anyways, my goal for today was diamond armor. So I went to craft a blast furnace to make an armor, except I didn't have any cobble to make a regular furnace first. So I guess I was going to craft my armor instead. So I crafted all 4 pieces of diamond armor and put them on right after, and after that I got curious and started breaking a redstone lamp, which immediately dropped me a piece of cobble. So now I had to find out how to make those again because I may have not been paying attention. Luckily though, there weren't many things that it could have been, so I figured it out pretty fast, and I made a furnace which I made into a blast furnace, which I then placed way away from most of the villagers, and the one near it had 0 interest and walked away. And it was also becoming nighttime, so I had to sleep so I can get the villager to actually come over here. So on day 6, I found out how to get oak wood, and I made a boat, and I drugged this guy all the way over there just to lure him into his prison with the promise of a job. I then used some of the emerald blocks I had to mass trade with him and max him out, except all of his diamond enchants were trash. So the best one I got from him was a protection 1 chest piece. Yay! So I left the village and I spent the rest of day 6 searching for the best way to go. And on the way, I found out how to get free dragon eggs. On day 7, I found a massive desert, which meant I was about to become a very rich man because all of this sand equals emeralds. And I could use the emeralds to make a beacon out of emeralds, which I could use to get more emeralds faster. This was peak capitalism. But first, I went to check out this abandoned shipwreck that I found nearby, and out of the 2 chests I looted, there was basically nothing inside. So I went back to the desert, and what is that I see in the horizon? It was a simp villager tower. So I began heading towards the simps so I could rightfully exterminate them from existence. That is, until I got distracted with some rabbits that I hunted down and killed one, and he dropped some rails that I broke and they dropped lodestones. And then it hit me. Rails dropped bastion chest loot tables. And if I found a mineshaft, I would be set with some easy netherite. So after hunting down the rabbits, I went back to begin my war with the simp clan who lived in the village hidden behind the paywall. And they dropped exactly what they regularly did, which was basically nothing. So I looted the top of their base and there was 1 piece of quartz and nothing dropped anything fun or valuable. So I 100% jumped down willingly and definitely didn't get knocked off, and I ran in a different direction towards a nearby desert village. And after getting to the village, I found out that the banner boy had been following me the entire time. At that point, I realized that honestly, I should have made a sextuple beacon and started a raid, but totems weren't guaranteed, so instead, I just kind of led him into the golem, and after the golem killed him, I thanked my man by killing him to see what he dropped, which was basically nothing. Sorry, Iron Golem. On day 8, while exploring more of the desert, I stumbled across my first desert temple. So I dug down and the chests were basically empty and nothing dropped me anything, so I just kind of left. And after that, I found another technically not sunken ship that I dug into, and the chests were identical, so I guess they aren't even worth looting anymore. After that, I continued exploring, and over the hill there was a huge sand village that was full of more useless farmers. Although while there, I did discover something absolutely busted. Inside one of the chests, there was a wet sponge, and when you break the wet sponge, it drops some guardian drops, 1 cobble, and another wet sponge. And yes, that means I found a way to get infinite cobblestone in this random world. And after that, once the sun began to go down, I looked around the desert and then struggled to go to bed because of lots of mobs harassing me. On day 9, I continued exploring looking for a good place to call home until I found another sand village that actually had a blacksmith this time. So I leveled him up and I bought his enchanted diamond axe and diamond sword to replace my gross, icky iron tools. Unfortunately though, the things that he gave me weren't that great, and the best I had was a sword with sharpness 2. However, now that I had most of the diamond stuff that I needed, I set out for the next 4 days straight looking for a good place to call home. During this time, I stopped by tons of villages, tested out tons of new blocks, and on day 12, after finally escaping the never-ending savanna and desert biomes, I made myself a diamond pickaxe and used an anvil to give it efficiency 4, and I stumbled upon greatness. Lodestones dropped bastion chest loot, so I could use each lodestone that I got from rails to farm netherite, ancient debris, iron, and diamond enchanted items just by making a rabbit farm. Or at least that's what I thought, because right after I found an even faster way to get them. The crying obsidian that drops from the bastion chests dropped orange tulips, which then became more lodestones, which then dropped more bastion chests that contained more crying obsidian. It's a loop, okay? I'm caught in a loop. I found an infinite loop of mad stonks. Shortly after this, I continued exploring for a home, and I ran into yet another desert. However, here I made a huge, massive brain play. I found out that grass blocks can be made into acacia pressure plates, and those drop creeper heads. So I may not have found a place to live, but at least now I had an infinite source of entirely decorative blocks that I probably wouldn't even use in the future. Listen, man, I'm easily distracted. For days 14 through 15, I finally made it out of the endless desert and savanna hell that I had been stuck in, except now I was stuck in a new kind of hell. I was stuck in an entire valley of these gross, difficult to climb mountains. But it was all good because after all this time, I had finally found somewhere that I might be able to call home. I stumbled upon my favorite village type, a spruce village. However, this place was kind of a mess with hills and caves everywhere, but I think it will work out once I clear everything because I could make it into a cool mountain castle. So as it was becoming night, I stole one of the villagers' beds and I went to sleep. On day 16, after waking up in a bed that I had stolen, I began Operation Village Cleanup by making a bunch of crafting benches and some chests to finally clean out my absolute headache of an inventory. And after that, I crafted a new compass and placed a lodestone, and I linked them together so I could always find my way back here. And then I began my rampage against nature. I began cutting down every tree and punching every piece of grass, which was honestly kind of off-putting because none of them dropped the things that they were supposed to, and normally I would be excited to harvest spruce wood, except instead I was getting red banners and lime green wool. Anyways, cue montage. On day 17, I discovered a god tier method of getting wood. After breaking dirt, I get crimson stairs, and they dropped me acacia wood, which can then be made into buttons, and the buttons dropped a villager chest that drops all different types of wood, including more acacia, which means I now had infinite wood. I mean, look at the mess that is this pile. Anyways, I spent the entire day doing this and trying to decide on what needed to be done for this village, so that way I could make it into my kingdom. And honestly, after looking around, there's just too many hills and all of the houses were all over the place, so I would basically have to rebuild them. So by the end of the day, I decided that this place wasn't quite the home for me. And I also mercilessly cut down all of those trees for nothing. So on the next day, I grabbed all of my valuables and I set back out for a more flat village to build around and terraform. And right away, I found a swamp that had vines that I haven't tested yet. And after punching them, they dropped slime blocks. So I collected a stack of them because, I mean, honestly, why not? I could probably use them for a TNT duper or something in the future. And after that, I ran into what I've been looking for a long time, a flower biome. So I went around smacking different flowers that I haven't tried before until I found a pile of orange tulips. Each orange tulip I collected became one concrete powder, which then became a lodestone, which also became a bastion chest. I am so glad that I have a text file with all of these because things were getting way out of hand. So anyways, I spent the rest of the day until sundown beating up orange tulips and collecting tons of lodestones. On day 19, I continued collecting orange tulips and converting them into lodestones, and boy, just look at this insane loot. While doing this, that little light inside of my massive brain kicked on again, and I realized I could use bone meal to make infinite more of these since each flower biome had a consistent pattern of flowers that I could take advantage of by continuing to harvest the same exact spot for a thick stack of stonks. However, at this point, my inventory was way too full of loot, so I had to stop for now, but honestly, I was kind of liking this area. There was a river full to the brim of beacon fish, and there were nearby flower fields that I could harvest for infinite loot. So as it became nighttime, I made a bed and I slept in the field that will soon become my new kingdom. On day 20, now that I knew exactly where I was actually going to live, I began setting up shop by making some chests to clear out my fat inventory and finally be free. I crafted more of the acacia buttons and I began the mass harvest of wood because I was thinking about building a bunch of buildings inside of the kingdom to make it kind of like my favorite village, the Spruce Village. So after making a bunch of wood, I had the idea to continue testing out things that I haven't broken yet, which was pretty much just dark oak and jungle fences. So since I now had infinite sticks, I crafted some of each and I broke them, and I got some mossy stone brick fence from one and iron golem drops from the other. And then I was blessed by RNGesus himself. Breaking the brick wall dropped freaking netherite blocks, which were the exact perfect block that I wanted to build my kingdom walls with. And I now had an infinite supply. Also, I want to apologize now about how much I shook my mouse around because I was very excited at this point. So now that I had an infinite supply of netherite blocks, the first thing I did was break it to see what it dropped. And it dropped the loot table of one of those more trash bastion chests. But I didn't care because I was now mad rich in Minecraft, which means I was important now, so I had zero time for those gross drops. From here on out, I would only be touching the most brand name of blocks, like all of those lodestones, because just look at the crazy loot that they drop. On day 21, I began by harvesting a stack of gray concrete for lodestones, and I began breaking them for some more gold blocks and loot, because the ideas for my ridiculous castle were flooding my head. And after getting some resources from the lodestones, I set off to find a good source of emerald blocks so I could make a beacon to begin terraforming. And while collecting sand, I found a much more comfortable place to build my castle that was actually near a super cozy beach. So I finished collecting my 3.5 stacks of emerald blocks and I headed back to my field to sleep the night away because I was going to have a busy next day moving all of my stuff from one field to the next. On day 22, I spent most of my time running back and forth delivering the piles of thick loot from one area to the next. And in the process of doing this, I realized that I actually had a neighboring village to conquer. I mean, befriend. Yeah, I was going to befriend them. Anyways, I crafted some torches and I began lighting up my area as night came, which I then realized was an absolute waste of time because I was just going to flatten this entire area out the next couple of days anyways. So instead, I just crafted a bed and I went to sleep under the beautiful, dramatic sky. On day 23, I grabbed a ton of emerald blocks and built myself a gorgeous sextuple beacon, and I activated all 6 buffs, and then I went to start clearing all of the dirt and and then it hit me. I didn't have efficiency 5 on my shovel, so this beacon made absolutely zero difference. So I concocted a big brain scheme to make a grindstone and use all of the enchanted loot for my lodestones to get enough XP to begin enchanting. But that meant I needed stone to make stone slabs, which, as sad as it is, they were not easy to get. So I broke some wet sponge for 3 cobble, and I had to smelt it in a furnace. What a sad life existence this was. Anyways, I used the stone slabs to craft a grindstone, and I began unenchanting the diamond loot that I had, and they gave me next to 0 XP. So at this point, I was basically out of options. That is, except for the village. So I went over there in the hopes that there was a librarian, and I found a lectern, but there was no librarian. So I went around breaking nearby job blocks until this cleric walked into the house and became a librarian, and he ended up with Fortune 3. And at that point, I did not know what to do. I had no books for trades, I couldn't break the lectern and re-roll him because it would drop something random, and I was just at a loss at this point. So I locked this guy in his house until I could figure out how to get a source of books. So I spent the rest of the night experimenting with breaking new things to find a way to get either lecterns, books, or bookshelves. And while doing this, I did find out how to get ender pearls for the end. However, I didn't write them down in my notes, and I 100% forgot about this later in the video. You'll see. Anyways, while breaking these blocks, I had stumbled upon a god tier opportunity. While I was testing different colored wools, I found out that pink wool dropped purple blocks, which I've broken before, but I hadn't broken the slabs yet. So my massive brain crafted some and broke them, and they dropped black terracotta, which then dropped the mother lode. Black terracotta dropped End City loot chests, which were full of absolutely busted diamond gear that had top tier enchantments. So instead of sleeping, similar to real life, I just stayed up and kept harvesting these instead. And while doing so, I kept swapping out my armor for the best enchantments and unenchanting everything for some mad levels. And I spent the entirety of the next day, day 24, breaking more of these blocks for OP enchanted loot and harvesting god tier enchantments. And by the time I was done, I had prot 4 on all of my armor and most of the other enchantments I would need, including mending, and I now had an OP pickaxe and shovel. On day 25, now that I was all set to go tool and armor wise, it was time to get clearing out the dirt and stone, so that way I had a flat area to build my castle on. And honestly, this was going to be interesting because I don't have a consistent way to get dirt and grass to fill in any holes or replace any of the stone. Anyways, cue montage. Overall, this process took until the end of day 26, and there was probably more land that I wanted to clear in the future, but for now, this was enough space to start laying out the wall for my future castle. For the next 3 days, I began grinding for netherite blocks and laying out the perimeter for the entrance of my castle base. Except at this point, I ran out of space for the second half of it, so I had to burn through a couple more shovels to clear the hills out of the way, and guess who showed up while I was doing this? That's right, the block breaking police themselves. So I deleted their chief from existence and obtained the Simp's Curse, which drew me to the nearby village like it was a VTuber girl's Twitch chat. And I may have ended up starting a raid, which spawned way up at the top of the nearby mountain just to fall down and get smacked by the nearest iron golem that I would like to refer to as a Twitch mod, because this man was cutting these simps down in front of everyone like a public execution. So anyways, I spent all night and most of day 29 fighting off this raid that I kind of regret starting because the evokers didn't drop totems of undying, and there might have been a couple of close calls where a bunch of mans ganged up on me and almost killed me, but don't tell anyone about that, okay? On day 30, now that I definitely finished that raid and didn't leave those trap villagers stuck in a perpetual state of fear, it was on to building the first of the mega beacons that would keep death away from my castle. I began by adding a giant totem of undying made of pure gold and emeralds, and yes, I know it's off center by 1 block, but that's intentional because at the very top of this there will be a tier 4 beacon, which is 9 by 9, so yes, I couldn't center it. It kills me inside a little bit, but it's okay. Anyways, after finishing the totem in the middle, I filled in all of the edges villages with the bougie netherite blocks, and I pretty much ran out of resources at this point, which meant it was back to harvesting fence and stone brick fence for profit, which I spent the rest of day 31 doing. On day 32, now that I found more supplies, it was back to working on the first mega beacon. So I added several layers to the top using netherite blocks and gold blocks as accents until I then ran out of gold blocks. So it was back to harvesting iron bars and wool for more piles of loot, and while I was at it, I also disenchanted everything and ended up with 45 more levels and enough gold to finish building the top of the beacon. So I spent the next day continuing the top part of the beacon, and apparently I was wrong because I quickly ran out of gold again, and this time I was not about to scrounge for more scraps of gold hidden between all of the golden gear that dropped from those end city chests. So instead, I built a perfect nether portal that was definitely not too tall, and I went into the nether in the great hunt for some more gold. And not too far away from my spawn, I found a couple of magma block pools, which gave me a clean couple of stacks of gold blocks. For the next 7 days, I kept rinse and repeating the process. I laid out the second mega beacon while here and there stopping to get more supplies, and then I added the finishing beacon on top, and I gave it regen, resistance 2, strength 2, speed 2, and jump boost 2. So that way, I was a god anywhere and everywhere around my base. And after finishing the second beacon, I went to clean up the wandering simps that had spawned while I was working, and apparently each trader llama drops the minecart chest loot pool from mine shafts. So I got a golden apple and some rails and stuff. Anyways, at this point, both of my mega beacons were done, and they were looking really good. However, I was now realizing the scale that I'm building at was going to take way too long for 100 days, so maybe for the irony of it, I could build some Shrek swamp looking shack in the middle of these massive walls that I could then call my home. On day 40, I had some more inspiration for what to do with the entrance of my base. However, I was pretty much out of gold at this point, and the nether was the last place I wanted to be without fire resistance. So it was on to plan B instead, the flower biome. So I ran back to where my old base was, and I got distracted by some more salmon, or as I like to call them, beacon fish. And after finishing my war on fish kind, I got to work punching some orange tulips and red tulips, because apparently they dropped concrete powder that became concrete that ended up dropping gold ingots. Anyways, cue flower harvesting montage. Overall, this process took until the end of day 43, and on the way home in the first field I was going to call my home, I could literally see my beacons proudly on display. Were they overkill? Yes. Yes, they were, but how else would I display my vast wealth? Anyways, after getting back to my base, I spent the night harvesting the concrete powder and lodestones for excessive piles of loot, and more specifically, gold. And by the time it was morning, I still only ended up with a little over 3 stacks of gold blocks. Nice. On day 44, the first thing I saw was another group of stands waging a siege on top of my first mega beacon, and I was not having any of that. So I went over to banish those nerds to the Doom dimension, and one by one, they foolishly knocked one another down into my domain, where I Control-Z'd them off the face of this earth. That is, until the last two, which I gave what I like to call special treatment. I just stood there and let them slowly execute the flag holder, so that way I didn't have to deal with the Simp's curse again as I went into the nearby village. And now that he was gone, I promoted the last guy to the person at the bottom of the leaderboards in Call of Duty that keeps dying, so I teabagged him. And this was a mission success. After this, I spent the rest of the day and the next 9 days straight absolutely going ham on resources because I was tired of constantly having to get more blocks in the middle of my building. Also, during this time, I broke acacia buttons for dark oak wood, and I had to burn all of the drops because they dropped my frame rate. Get it? I'll see myself out. Anyways, during these days, I harvested dark oak fence for mossy brick stairs for those sweet netherite blocks, and a ton of lodestones for iron, emeralds, diamondes, and most importantly, gold. I also set up a bunch of chests with some new item frames to organize all of my expensive blocks, because up until now, I've basically been living in an episode of Hoarders. Anyways, these days were very good. In the middle of all this harvesting, I went back to the nether because I remembered how all of the warped vines dropped purple blocks, which I could then use to make slabs, and mass harvest end city chest loot drops. Except while I was there, I ran into a buried bastion that had one chest with one obsidian in it. Thanks, I guess. However, I wasn't very interested in going into a bastion, so I just kind of left it there, and now that I had all those slabs, I could basically infinitely mend all of my tools, so things were looking pretty good. On days 55 through 58, now that I had enough resources to get me through building the entrance, I began building the 2 towers that would be in the center. I first started out by adding an inner golden tablet similar to the ones you would find in an Egyptian temple, and once they were done, I was honestly pretty happy with how it looked. I also added some emerald and diamond accents to really make them stand out and look more expensive. After that, I began building the 2 roofs for these towers, and if it looks like I'm following a guide, it's because I built these structures in a creative world before doing it here because netherite takes a year to mine, and I did not want to waste any more resources. Anyways, I turned both of these roofs into sextuple beacons for the perfect flex, and I gave each of them some level 2 buffs and some spicy regen, so that way every time I would get anywhere near this base, I would basically be God. I spent all of day 59 completely filling in each side of the 2 central towers. I added 2 more golden tablets to the backside so I could see my wealth from the inside, and I added a little archway for the tunnel entrance, and I filled in the other 2 sides of the towers so they were 100% done. And now the only thing that was left were the small walls that needed to go in between the mega beacons and the central towers, which were also mega beacons, I guess. If anything, they were super mega beacons because they actually gave me all the buffs, but you know what? It's fine. Don't worry about it. On day 60, now that the entrance to my base was complete, I spent the whole day working on the design for the walls that would go around my entire base. And while working on this, I also decided that for the back 2 corners of the castle wall by the ocean, to save some time and effort, I would make 2 smaller towers instead of making 2 more massive beacons. Anyways, by the time it was night, I was pretty much done with the front walls, and apparently I began playing Black Ops 3 because I was suddenly surrounded by a horde of zombies who just couldn't wait for my castle to be done. On days 61 through 62, I harvested dark oak wood for lime green banners and the banners for redstone blocks so I could craft lanterns to light up the castle walls. And after that, I spent day and night lighting up the ground and different parts of the beacons, and by the time it was the morning of day 63, things were looking sugoi. Also, at this point, I was very happy with how the base was turning out. I was kind of worried that the build was going to look ridiculous, but it's actually turning out so good. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of it. On days 63 through 65, I laid out the perimeter of the wall on the right side of the castle, and I built the perimeter for the next sextuple beacon tower. However, I had to change the size of it so it fit better as a corner tower, and after that, I added the beacon to the top, placed the 6 beacons on it, and activated all 6 of the spicy buffs so my domain could spread. Anyways, I began filling in the tower afterwards, and I ran out of netherite blocks. Again. And honestly, it wouldn't suck as bad getting more if my axe actually had efficiency 5. So I came up with a big brain plan to get an enchanting setup. And honestly, I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but I could use the leather from the chest drops and sugarcane to just make bookshelves manually myself. It was almost like I just kind of forgot that crafting existed because I was expecting it to drop from something. Anyways, I set off looking for things that dropped sugarcane, and then it clicked. Gravel. Gravel dropped sugarcane. So I began clearing out gravel in a nearby mountain area until I ran out, and then I resorted to getting the rest from the nearby ocean floor. And once I got back to my house, I crafted the paper into books and then into bookshelves, and I placed them all out and added an enchantment table to the center. After that, I crafted some more diamond axes, and after only 2 enchants, I got efficiency 4. However, that wasn't enough. I needed more, so I enchanted a 3rd, and I got another efficiency 4. So I took the 2 to an anvil, and I combined them for a super fast efficiency 5 axe. And while I was at it, I decided to do something that I should have done literally ages ago. I took it to a smithing table, and I digivolved it and the rest of my tools into some sweet netherite tools and armor. And now I pretty much had my full set of god armor, minus the mending that's missing on only my pants. I mean, who needs pants anyways, right? Anyways, now that the process was 5 times as efficient, I spent the next 3 days smacking away at some more dark oak fences and mossy cobblestone. And at this point, I felt like the Fire Nation. By the time I was done, not a single fence or wall will survive to tell the story. Then I spent the rest of day 68 moving all of my chests and items out of the way because the back wall went straight over top of them. And after that, I went back to finishing the outer walls, and this process took a long time. So here is a classy montage of all of the work that went into building this luxurious castle wall. Cue montage. Overall, this process took until day 78, and it took a lot of resource gathering in between because I kept running out of redstone lamps and levers that I used to light up the different sides of the walls, so that way they both looked good at night and they didn't become a Comic-Con of mobs. Anyways, after finishing everything up, it was looking really good from both the inside and the out. That is, except for maybe the back towers, because I might not have finished the other side of them, but we don't have to talk about that. On day 79, now that the walls of the castle were done, I began working on the inside area. I started by making a wood and cobblestone path at the entrance, and I set out hunting for dandelions for some more smooth stone, so that way I can make slabs for armor stands, because today I was going to begin the domination nation in my Minecraft world. So after collecting enough smooth stone, I crafted a ton of armor stands, and I placed 2 rows of them in the entrance to my base, so that way they could be my army of guards that welcomed me every time I came back home. After that, I spent the rest of the day breaking black concrete to farm more enchanted diamond armor and breaking levers so I could farm more enchanted gold armor. And after that, I placed the armor in a pattern of gold, netherite, and diamond, and I had it alternate for the opposite side. And by the end of day 81, I had finished the row of warriors in the path leading into my base. And it looked way more intense than I ever could imagined it to. I was in love with this base. On day 82, I spent the whole day harvesting acacia buttons for dark oak wood that I could use to build parts of my house until I was rudely interrupted by more sky demons that apparently dropped oak saplings when I killed them. So I tested out the oak saplings, and apparently they were the only way that I could get dirt, which is great because that means I will basically never fill in any of the holes in my base. Anyways, just look at all of the wood that I got while farming buttons. Those buttons drop hella oak planks and tons of sticky boys. On day 83, now that I had the supplies that I needed, I started to build the porch for my house. And I decided that for the interior of this house, I would basically be copying my house from my regular hardcore series, which recently hit 600 days, and you should totally go check it out. Anyways, I spent most of this day building the staircase and the porch, and I spent the night adding support pillars underneath that turned out pretty good. And after that, I topped it off by spreading out some lanterns, which are far superior to torches in every way. On day 84, I thought of a way to break the system for something that I needed for my house. I brought some torches over to the nearby sandy hill, and I used them to break the sand blocks in a hope that it would drop sand, and it worked. They actually dropped sand. So I did this for my first stack and a half of sand, so that way I could start making glass for my windows. And honestly, I really wanted to use glass blocks instead of panes, but at this point I was on a time crunch to finish my house and go to the end to kill the ender dragon 5 times. So glass panes it was. Anyways, I threw the sand into some ferni, which yes, that is the plural for furnace, I'm pretty sure, and I spent the night filling in the floor of my house with some dark oak wood planks. Also during this night, I had to break my nether portal so that way I could finish building the house, and apparently nether portal blocks drop light blue banners, which is kind of a shame because if that was actually something good, I could just keep building and breaking my portal by placing 1 block. Anyways, by the time I was finished placing out the floor, it was the beginning of the next day, and it also started raining right after I could no longer sleep. Yay. On day 85, I spent the entire day crafting chests and building the way over the top, super excessive storage rooms that I will definitely not use in this world. And during this process, I absolutely blew through my chests full of wood, but it was worth it because this place was looking pretty good. Anyways, after completing the chest area, minus the item frames, I began harvesting cobble from the wet sponge and smelting it so I could add stone bricks to my floor. So that way I could brighten up the place a bit more and make it look a lot more like my regular hardcore house. I continued working on the details for the next 2 days. I added wood supports in between the netherite for the flex, and I crafted all of my glass into panes, and I filled in all of my windows. I also made a wall of unnecessary auto smelters, and while building them, I learned that hoppers also drop dirt, so it turns out I could replace the stone and all of the holes with grass. However, it would probably take too long because that is a ton of iron that I would need for that. Anyways, at the end of day 88, my mind was blown. A wandering trader spawned, so I bought some ice and ferns from him because I wanted to see what they dropped. So I placed down the ice and I broke it, and it dropped more pots and ferns, which I then tried breaking together, and they dropped nothing. It was at that moment that I realized that potted ferns dropped blaze rods. However, they just didn't drop at 100% rate, similar to how blazes actually work. So that meant that getting blaze rods was probably not going to be that fun. However, I did have a bunch of concrete powder that dropped flower pots, so I broke a bunch of that and placed out the rest of my ferns into pots, and I was once again interrupted by more sky demons. So I deleted them from existence and I went to sleep for the night. On day 89, I woke up with a genius idea. I could put looting 3 on my sword and try breaking the fern pots with it to see if it affects the drop rate. So I began harvesting purple slabs for black concrete and the black concrete for more end city chest drops. And I unenchanted every item I got that I didn't need until I finally found a looting 3 sword. It might have only been an iron sword, but looting 3 was looting 3. So I tested it out on the potted ferns and they seemed to drop way more blaze rods, but I did end up with a total of 14 blaze powder, which wasn't much, but was technically enough. Anyways, after this, I spent the rest of the night experimenting with drops, trying to figure out how to get more ferns and hopefully more ender pearls, because up to this point, I've only found 2, and since I didn't put them in my notes, I have no recollection of how I got them. On day 90, I made the big brain decision to not work on the roof of my house, and instead add fire aspect 2 to my sword, and go out on a journey to find an ice biome. So I grabbed a spare sword that had fire aspect 2 in mending, and I turned it into netherite, and I added it to my first sword so that way I could now cook cows on the fly, so I had some better saturation food. I also named it the perfect name of cow cooker, because alliteration is perfect. Anyways, I gathered all of the supplies that I would need, and I slowly walked through my rows of loyal guards before leaving, and I took another look at just how gorgeous my base had become. But don't worry, I will be back, and this time with the supplies I need to kill the Ender Dragon before these 100 days were up. So I grabbed my boat and began venturing in the ocean behind my base, since ice biomes usually spawn in ocean, and I found a nearby taiga biome that I decided to follow since cold biomes typically spawned near other cold biomes. And not long after, I found a snowy biome that had ice. So in excitement, I ran over to break it, and they dropped scaffolding instead because it was regular ice and not blue ice. But in the distance, I saw exactly what I was looking for. There was an ice something biome. No clue what you call it, but after heading over to it, I let it rip on that ice like I was a Beyblade. And just look at all of the beautiful fern drops. I never thought I'd be excited for ferns in my life. So I began placing them out, and even without the looting sword, they were dropping a whole bunch of blaze rods. However, at this point, it was becoming nighttime, so I settled with 21 blaze rods for the night, and I went to sleep. On day 91, I woke up and immediately began heading home. I hopped in my boat, and not before long, I could see the totally finished side of my base. That was sarcasm. However, I had way more important things to do because I was quickly running out of time, and I still had a dragon to clown on. So once I got home, I harvested some more of the ferns on my front porch until I had about half a stack of blaze rods. Then I threw the rest into 2 different chests, and after this, I spent the rest of the day experimenting with more drops until I found out that green concrete dropped gas drops. So I made a ton of birch doors for green concrete, and I began mass harvesting them so I could make end crystals to resummon the dragon. That is, if I could even find ender pearls at this point. I spent the rest of the day testing random things, and later that night, I had a massive breakthrough. I began crafting all of the different types of wools into different carpets and banners, and after the blaze rod incident, I realized that some items that drop nothing are probably just mob drops and you didn't get lucky. So I crafted more iron bars, and I harvested a ton of different wools to test, and I had finally found it. Yellow banners dropped nothing, so I made more of them, and these boys dropped me 2 ender pearls. Yellow banners dropped enderman drops. Also during this process, I found out that cyan banners apparently dropped netherwort, which was perfect because I can now brew potions of slow falling for the dragon fight. So I placed some chests down by my door for the supplies that I was going to bring with me to the end for the fight. I crafted myself a bow and I put it in there to later enchant, and not long after I found out that looms dropped purple banners, so I harvested a bunch of them and I added them to the front of my house, so that way they would better match the theme of the PainDomination aesthetic. For the next 2 days, I continued crafting iron bars and crafting the wool into banners for ender pearls, and this process took what felt like literal years. That is, until I remembered something that would help out a ton. Birch leaves also dropped black wool alongside emerald blocks. That very black wool could then be used to make black banners, which for some reason dropped yellow banners. So I went out to the nearest birch trees and I beat them into submission with my bare hands, because I forgot my hoe back at the base. And let me tell you, these birch trees were lifesavers, because you saw just how little black and yellow wool dropped from that massive pile from the iron bars. Anyways, I went back home and grabbed my hoe, and I ran back out to the nearby birch forest to do some classic deforestation. And in the process, I also got a ton of free emerald blocks that I could use to make some beacons in the end. Honestly, just because I can. I don't really need them, but I mean, why not? Overall, by the time I was done mining, my inventory was ripped with loot. So I went back home and harvested so many black and yellow banners that I dreamt of Wiz Khalifa later that night. And I ended up with a little over 5 stacks of ender pearls, which was easily overkill for what I needed. On day 95, I began the day by breaking more black concrete to grind XP by unenchanting all of the items that dropped from them, and after that, I kept enchanting bows until I got all of the enchants that I wanted, except I only had power 3, which isn't good enough. So I went to a nearby anvil and combined all of them together, and I named it the Dragon Deleter. However, I was not done yet. This thing needed to be bigger, better, and juicier. Did not expect to say that sentence today. So it was back to harvesting more terracotta and grinding away at that grindstone for those sweet juicy levels until I had over 30 again. After that, I went back to enchant some more until I had exactly what I needed for the perfect god bow. I mean, minus the order of the enchantments, because they kill my OCD. Anyways though, I mended them together, and the Dragon Deleter was now a power 5, punch 2, flame, unbreaking 3, infinity superboy bow. On day 96, I crafted some brewing stands so I could make some potions, except I was out of glass for potion bottles. So I went back to the nearby beach to assist with the erosion by harvesting some more sand with torches. Then I went back to my base to smelt the glass and craft some bottles so I could make some slow falling potions out of the phantom membrane that dropped from cocoa beans. And after brewing 6 slow falling potions, I crafted 48 of my ender pearls into eyes of ender, and I went to craft the 18 end crystals that I would need to fight the dragon 5 times. Except I ran out of glass again, so it was back to the beach for some more erosion. And I sat there harvesting sand until I ran out of torches, and I had the 112 plus more sand that I was going to need for 18 total end crystals. And after throwing all of that sand into my auto smelters, I spent the night AFKing while I waited for it to smelt. On day 97, I crafted the remaining 16 end crystals, and I filled my inventory with everything that I wanted to bring to the end, which was definitely overkill, but you have to remember, I wasn't only going to kill the ender dragon once, I was going to kill her 5 times. So now that I was prepared, I gave my base one more glance before I set out on my journey, and I used my first Eye of Ender. And just like that, I was on my way to finding the stronghold. Along the way to finding the stronghold, I killed any of the cows that I could find so that way I could get some extra cooked steak for saturation, and as it was becoming nighttime, I found myself a nearby cozy village to sleep in, since I didn't really bring a bed. It was also a good thing that I brought my compass with me to find my way home after I respawned, because I did not write down the coordinates of my base. Anyways, after waking up the next day, I continued following the Eyes of Ender until they turned to the right and they went straight down into a mountain, which you know what that means. I dug straight down until I saw a stone brick, and just like that, I had found the stronghold. And not long after searching, I found the portal room right next to the library that was floating over a ravine. Nice. So I put in all of the Eyes of Ender, and just like that, the sound of the portal opening rung out across this world of randomosity. On day 99, now that I had everything I needed and the portal was opened, I was ready. So I jumped into the end portal and I dug my way up to land, and I began building my first tier 4 beacon for the lulz and extra buffs. And after placing out the 4 beacons, I activated regen, jump boost 1, strength 2, resistance 2, and speed 2. And I began fighting the first of 5 ender dragons. And since everything these 100 days has led up to these very fights, let's make them amazing. Cue epic music and cue montage. I had slain the Ender Dragon 5 times in a row, and for some reason, I miscounted how many end crystals I needed, but you know what? It doesn't matter. This battle had me amped up and ready to go. Fighting this many dragons in the end actually made me want to go back to my 600 days hardcore world and open the rest of the portals. So let me know in the comments if that's something you would like to see in a future video. Anyways, now that I had sucked the very life out of this end dimension, I went back through the portal to find myself in that very village from before, except now it was zombie infested. But that didn't matter because this was my last day in this world, and I wanted to see my base one last time. So I followed my compass home while constantly yeeting myself along with the spare ender pearls from the fight until I saw it glowing in the distance, my beautiful, massive base. So I ender pearled my way up to it and I yeeted a pearl onto the wall because I was too cool for doors, and here I was. I had made it back home alive, and I accomplished all of my goals from the beginning of the video. So what did I do? I spent my last few moments in this world watching the beautiful sunrise. And just like that, I had survived 100 days of hardcore Minecraft in a world full of random drops. And real quick before the video ends, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's been supporting me along the way. Also, thank you to those who helped go the extra mile by becoming channel members or buying merch. It really does help me out, and I really wouldn't be able to do this without all of you, and I am so grateful. Anyways, this has been PainDomination, and I will see you all in the next video.